Hello, everybody. It's Dr. Andrew Gums here, another episode of Artificial Intelligence and Cybersurgery. We're episode 71. We are the official journal of AONS, our new society, Artificial Intelligence Organization for the Next Generation of Surgeons. And the official journal for both AONS and the podcast is Artificial Intelligence Surgery. We got our first impact factor, which we're going to be mentioning quite a bit. We're pretty proud of it. We're Q1, which means we have an impact factor of 3.6. And I will let my co-host, Dr. Vincent Grasso, introduce our next guest. Take it away, Vincent.
Hey, thank you. It's exciting to be at episode 71. We're moving towards 100, Andrew, so it's going to be fun.
You know, before you introduce Andreas, I've actually been talking to some people, and we're gonna get a YouTube channel, and we're gonna work on trying to get onto Spotify, believe it or not.
Nice.
Yeah. So,
Well,
interrupt.
making progress. Another Andreas. I have a meeting with tomorrow with my friend at the medical device company. His name is Andrew. We've got about 9 Andreases in our network.
And Andrew comes, of course, from andros in Greek, which means man. So very,
Yeah.
very simple. That's why there's a lot of us.
Well, Andreas, thank you for taking time to join our podcast. I believe you're based in Denmark. You work with a group of interesting companies, and I think what our audience is going to be very excited to listen to and learn about the very cool things you're doing at Ledidi. And rather than me paraphrasing and summarizing, could you introduce yourself a little better to our audience? And looking forward to speaking with you about your exciting work.
Well, thank you, Vincent and Andrew, for having me on. It's very exciting. I think it's really cool for me to just keep track of everything you do. You're really active. You're getting a lot of stuff out there, and I just want to applaud the work that you do for the community. So well done and congratulations. Yeah, first off, my name's Andreas, Norwegian guy living in Denmark. I've done so for the past 16 years. I guess first and foremost, I'm a husband and father of two, almost three.
Congratulations.
Nice, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, kind of my day job is partnerships director for Ledidi. And Ledidi is a Norwegian company with a solution for clinical research and registries. So we actually originated kind of in your field, Andrew. One of our co-founders is actually an HPP surgeon. He was working at a Norwegian guy, but working at MD Anderson in Texas some while ago as a postdoc. And he was hosting some of these huge registries, just dealing with a bunch of spreadsheets. And as with any good innovation story, decided to scratch his own itch. There's got to be a better way than dealing with all these spreadsheets.
Yes.
And that was kind of the plant, or like the seed that planted the idea for Ledidi. And I know you have a thing for like the definitions of words, Andrew, so I'll just define Ledidi. It's actually the name of a berry, so kind of subtle hint to Apple and our ambitions there.
But because I was going to ask you, of course, I wanted you to tell people, and you told me, but I didn't put two and two together. So I love it. Okay.
Right. It's a slight hint of ambition there, but it's also the Ledidi berry is called the miracle berry because when you eat it and then you eat something sour, it's going to taste sweet. So it's kind of an analogy in terms of we want to make it sweeter to do research, right? And basically what we've done, we've made this really user-friendly platform for that combines data collection with analysis. And we just at every step try to lower the bar for people to engage with research, make it easier to set up studies, collect data, work collaboratively across institutions and sites on shared data resources, and then also obviously not just get data into a box, which is typically what happens, but also really make that analyzable and visualize that information in real time, such that you can actually facilitate knowledge sharing across sites, et cetera, and kind of move the field forward. And also just bridge that gap between research and clinical practice. So Ledidi, I think, was conceptualized around 2016. It was kind of a weekend and evening thing with our co-founders who were transplant surgeons and HPP surgeons who teamed up with a couple of software engineers. And then around 19, we raised the first round of capital, got our first few employees, kind of turned into an embryonic stage, early stage company. And then COVID hit, which was kind of a uh, a blessing in disguise for us. It was a perfect showcase for what we did. So we were working with Oslo University Hospital to set up 7 national COVID-19 registries and research projects. I think the first one was set up in like 4 hours and then running across 18
In
hospitals.
what countries? What country?
Sorry?
What country?
Just Norway, but basically all across Norway.
Okay.
And so that was like the perfect pilot because then you're working collaboratively, you're understanding this new thing kind of in real time with the built-in dashboards and everything. And that process led also University Hospital and kind of the surrounding region to think, okay, maybe we need to think differently about registries and its roles going forward. And that led to a procurement process. And this being, I won't say too much, but it took 4 years for various reasons. But it was a competitive tender, and ultimately we won that at the end of last year. So we're in the middle of rolling that out now across research and clinical registries within that region. And
I
yeah.
can't resist. Remind me if you remember, was Norway pro-vaccine or against vaccine? Am I confusing that with Sweden? I believe Sweden didn't do vaccines. What did Norway do? I can't remember.
Yeah, we did vaccines.
Okay, good. And was the public very happy with the results, or I mean, the data probably better than most people.
Oh, this is slightly before my time, and I was living in Denmark at the time. But it was, yeah, we took COVID really seriously in Norway. We were really good at keeping our distance and doing all the right stuff. And me being someone who came from Denmark, I remember doing my testing on one side of the border and coming across with the ferry on the other side and doing another test immediately after. This was for Christmas. Suddenly I was COVID positive and I had needed to go into isolation for the duration of Christmas and far into the new year. So it was a weird time, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, in any case, I joined the company about 3.5 years ago. My remit is kind of focusing on everything that goes on outside of Norway. So I've been working a lot towards the UK, Spain, US, a little bit of Germany. So we've got some really good partnerships and customers outside of Norway, and that's kind of my focus.
So
I don't have a clinical background, but I'm like really innovation
what's that? Sorry?
interested. Yeah, I don't have a clinical background, so I hope
Right,
that doesn't.
no, but clearly, but that's exactly my question. But what do you have training in computer science and in AI? Are you more a business guy? What is your angle?
So my angle is I'm an MBA. I did my bachelor's or my undergrad in Aarhus in Denmark, and then I went to China for my master's, where I studied innovation management as part of my MBA.
Where in
China, Beijing, so right in the center of Zhongguancun, kind of China, Silicon Valley. And this was in the golden years of innovation from China, right? This was 2013, 2015. A
how is
lot of
your
stuff happened at
Chinese?
that. 我会说一点儿普通话，我普通话说的不好。
Wow, so nice, very nice. But the courses were in English, I imagine.
Yes, yes. It was kind of a joint venture thing with equal participation from Danish universities, including
Dude,
faculty and students, and from Chinese ones. So that was great. The dynamics became that you needed to respect each other and find collaborative ways of working. Whereas when you go as a usual kind of exchange student, you're kind of sat at the back, kind of being the odd one out. Here you had to act as equals, and that just made some incredible things for the dynamics in terms of how groups played out and so on.
how long were you in China?
A year and a half.
Okay, but it's actually very good that you're in China. I'll put it to you that way. The reason I say that is a large part of the team that I work with, who the CEO is now an American citizen, but originally from China. So I think they will love if you speak a little Chinese anyway, for obvious reasons. That's a huge bonus. Good. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So my interest has kind of always been innovation management, and I did tech for about like IT consulting for about 6.5 years before joining Ledidi. And while I was doing kind of a full-time gig in consulting, I co-founded a tech startup too, where we also used optimization techniques, which is kind of a sub-branch of AI, to help with staff scheduling and rosters for like nurses, etc., in hospitals. We built a really good solution. I worked with a very smart friend of mine to work on it. But that was also my first meeting with the commercial side of dealing with healthcare organizations. And yes, you can build some great tech, but you also need to have a really smart go-to-market model, and you need to have funding because probably going to take a while to make any money at all. So that
Oh,
was my first meeting with reality, and that's obviously a lesson I've taken into to Ledidi. As one of the first commercial hires there were no preset playbook. We had some assumptions about how things would play out, but healthcare is incredibly contextual. There is so much regulation and ways to find funding, et cetera, et cetera. It's really hard to say, okay, this is our repeatable standard sales motion, and this is just going to work in every setting. That's just not going to play out that way.
yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why Vincent and I set up obviously this podcast, but more importantly, why we developed Aons is because, Vincent and I throughout the decades we've made relationships with people in business, but it took me a long time to make good connections, and we're trying to help get people with good ideas, young doctors, young researchers, young computer scientists. We're trying to help them
Mm.
get connected with industry sooner rather than later. Because as you said, and as you know, you're not getting anywhere in today's world without money. You know, I don't even want to say it's a necessary evil because it's not. I don't believe it's evil. It's just a necessary. It's like oxygen.
Yeah.
Money and research. I think nowadays more than ever is they're one and the same. Vincent knows a lot about that. Vincent, you worked very closely in Japan with a company in Japan, if I remember correctly. Panasonic.
Yeah, we did. I was a healthcare advisor to the chief technology officer to Panasonic North America, and
Mhm.
learned a lot about how a very large, consumer electronics company like Panasonic, a massive monster company, has complexities in how they do business, how they work with small companies, how they do
Mhm.
business development. It's not. It's very different than what you would think. Unless you're in it, it's hard to explain and experience it. But a lot of lessons learned from working with big companies, right? You learn things.
So speaking of lessons, Andreas, this podcast is basically an excuse for Vincent and I to talk to each other, meet people, and everyone get to know each other. So I'm going to give Vincent some updates that I didn't get a chance to give him. So, yeah, incidentally, I talked with with our investors. That's what I'll call them. I don't want to put their name out there just yet. But we have some funding to get a logo, which I think that'll be good for us. And
Wow.
so I think things are looking up. And that brings us to my next point, which is why I met Andreas and why we're working together, is you know the team that I work with. They're very interested in the Ergos project. All right, they're very interested in artificial intelligence, radiomics, genomics, oncopathomics, and surgeomics project, which is
Mhm.
basically this. We're trying to create an AI-powered tumor board for our surgical patients. We're going to use pancreatic cancer as our first model. Andreas and Vincent, you both know that we have about seven, maybe eight centers across Europe, and we're going to be collecting clinical data.
Mhm.
Andreas is going to tell us about the beautiful website that he's already set up. We're going to collect the last preoperative CT scan or MRI, and
Mhm.
also pathology slides. And we're going to then work with the team in Scotland, who's going to help us develop an algorithm to interpret that data so that we can start to, stop guessing as much as we do during tumor boards and try to get, an AI advisor basically
Mhm.
also there during tumor board to help us decide what chemotherapy to give patients, what immunotherapy to give patients, when to do surgery, when to do radiation therapy, when not to do all of these things.
Mhm.
And then eventually we're going to spread out to all sorts of different initially gastrointestinal cancers, but the hope is to ultimately get, up into the chest, head into the neck, brain, breast, what have you, but then also to
Mhm.
get into benign diseases ultimately. But but Andreas, can you let Vincent know a little bit more about what your platform looks like, how you store things, um, how other people can, if they're interested in doing data collection, the complexities of the cloud, any issues or any, as you know, we have a big problem getting information shared across borders. Do you have any insights for that? Any workarounds? I mean, we can tell the listeners a little bit our workaround for collecting data initially, but which is basically keeping, the data accessible only to each individual hospital until we can pay for the lawyers so that they can, we can start to cross-pollinate. But can you just tell a little bit more practically about our how Ledidi can help people do this type of research?
So just breaking it down a little bit, it's what you're looking to do in this initial phase is just get these sites working in various countries to pull their data and on their patients. And like you said, it's clinical data, and you add various imaging files to that, so you have rich context on each different patient. And then you can, once you have that.
How do you preserve like the quality of the data? How do you now, Vincent, I think you understand this better than I do, but first off, you have to de-identify the data. Then how do you save it without degrading the data? How are you able to do that? I mean, is that a problem? Can you just hit save, or like how do you copy something at the highest level?
No, we don't do anything in terms of kind of compressing files on our end. You just decide which files you want to upload together, with the corresponding clinical information. You add that into our entries. So basically, the way that Ledidi works, Vincent, is it's a cloud-based system. So you just access it from a browser. You log in with MFA and all the appropriate safeguards in place, and then you open an entry using an ECRF. And in that ECRF, you have the option to add one or multiple images, and you can
What is
add
ECRF?
Oh, it's an electronic case report form. So basically, it's just a form that you open and you input information about a single patient, and you add the relevant files, like let's say MRIs and CTs, etc. You just upload those, and they'll be stored together and we use Amazon Web Services, located in Germany. So it's kind of a way to make sure that everything goes to the same repository. And some of the things we've fixed with Ledidi is make it really easy by using permissions to make sure that you can share data safely across the sites. So if there are portions of the data set that has directly identifiable information and you don't have a data sharing agreement in place that allows that, then you can mark those variables as restricted and make sure that only people, let's say, at the site involved with the direct data capture who need that to see that information can see it. Anyone else would be cut off from that portion of the data set. Or people working together from a single site can only see the information coming from their site, even though they are actually aggregated into a larger source. So you can kind of slice and dice the data using permissions in various ways to make sure that it is a safe repository for sharing, even if you have different privacy regulations or data sharing agreements in place. So it's really flexible like that.
I'm just going to jump in here for a second, just so people can get a little bit more context. I was impressed because we talked. I sent you an Excel. I told you what I wanted, and I think that evening you had already set up a website, right? I
Yeah.
think it was almost a little bit freaky, if you will. So is it that easy? People can contact you. They can give you an Excel. These are the things that we're looking at. This is the data
Yeah.
points that we want. This is the data that we want saved. And is it really as easy as it sounds? I mean,
Yes.
like you said, if I have a problem sharing certain types of information, you just write that down in a request, and then you have people who can just do that for us.
Well, so we have the people, but it's built and designed to be a self-service tool, which is why we made it radically easier to use than most other database software, which is why, yeah, I actually had a stop timer. So I spent about 19 minutes setting up your entire project, like setting it up, defining the variables, organizing them into forms, adding some rudimentary dependencies, and all right, I want to check what these grades actually mean. So I'll add some help texts saying that so you can select the right thing, right? It took me 19 minutes. And obviously, we can probably make some improvements there. Like I mentioned, you didn't have any diagnosis types in your data set. We can add them as a kind of drop-down options, et cetera. But there is like small tweaks like that. But basically, it's a self-service tool. It's really easy to use. We want to make sure that we lower the barriers to, and there are barriers everywhere to doing research and registries and collaborative stuff, right? You mentioned lawyers and kind of data sharing agreements, et cetera. But there's also the how do you get started gap. So we just wanted to make a tool that's really intuitive, both in terms of setting it up, running it, and doing the analysis. I think that's where we succeeded really well. And one of the absolutely the key differentiators with Ledidi versus everything else that's on the market. So, and yeah, we fixed some pretty hairy things around data sharing across institutional. This is the kind of stuff where you usually look towards like federated infrastructure or synthetic data or stuff like that, which for me is like unnecessarily complex when you can just use permissions in the way that we do it to make sure that you only share the safe portions of the data or doing it in ways that are compliant with the data sharing agreements. It's a much more pragmatic approach, and it's much faster, much cheaper, and I think it's also much more reliable. So I think we've done some really fundamental things really well. And what that enables us to do is to get that structured data collected across those different sites like you're doing. You can use that to train your AI models. And if you have good clinical data, good imaging data, relevant stuff that you can use for training the model, it's going to take less of it because you'll get much clearer signal from your data. I think a really interesting development I've noticed in the past year or two is that we always used to talk about healthcare data as being unstructured data. It's always messy. Now with AI, they start calling it multimodal. It's not messy. It's just in different formats, in different places, and doesn't look the same, but it's all ingestible for the AI, right? And I think that's a huge mindset shift in a way in terms of what we can actually do with this massive corpus of data. But still, the old adage, garbage in, garbage out, holds true. The better, more structured data you can feed the AI models when you want to train an algorithm like you're intending to do, the better outcomes you're going to get. And I think that's where we can also play a big part, rather than just ingesting a massive corpus and not being really sure what you're kind of getting out. If you can control the inputs, you also have greater control over getting valid outputs.
So the limitations, as you know, for us were we're just finding someone like you that could set up a website as easily as you did. So that's really not your limiting factor. Now, your limiting factor we've alluded to is, or maybe it was before we started recording, but is storage. So who do you have to pay for storage? How is that taken care of? You mentioned a company in Germany for web services, but then storage is different? How does that, like, explain that to me?
Yeah, so our infrastructure uses Amazon Web Services, and obviously, if we store large amounts of data, it gives us a bigger bill from Amazon Web Services. And equally, if you're processing a lot, that
you
also
mentioned a company in Germany. What's the company in Germany?
Amazon Web Services.
Oh, it is. It's still. So Amazon, of course, they're also in Germany, is what you've been trying to tell me this whole time. Got you. Okay. So you have to use them for storage, obviously, and that's a cost.
Yeah, storage and processing, etc. And obviously that's for kind of apparent reasons. They're able to invest billions into their security and their performance. So it's just kind of the best data centers around. And obviously there are questions now around American ownership. I'm not sure if we want to spend a lot of time in this podcast going into that issue, but it's
I have learned to at least when I'm being recorded to shy away as much as possible from political topics. So it's a good time to pass the baton to Vincent. So you've been hearing a lot, as you saw. We saw the little alert that we have less than 10 minutes left on our podcast. So Vincent, what are you hearing? What are you liking? What are you not liking? Do you think we need to convince Andreas to hire a lawyer next to help us with our next step? What do you think?
No, it's really
which is getting collaboration is what I mean.
Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, having a company that's made it simple to facilitate the uploading of multimodal data, right? So there's, radiology imagery data is very different than text from an EMR, right? Different than lab data. So they made it easy to securely package and manage that for an end user that's not a computer scientist. That's a great thing. It sounds like the security frameworks, the regulatory frameworks are in place. I think part of the challenge, Andrew, with a lot of physicians that want to move towards using platforms like AWS to do AI, where the real costs, I think, and Andreas, you correct me if I'm not accurate, having 1,000 CTs of the abdomen with contrast is a very large amount of data. They're about 500 megs to a gigabyte per file.
Mm.
1,000 pages of text is only a megabyte. So when you're going to be processing in machine learning, hundreds of radiology images,
Mm.
depending what you're doing, that's where the bulk of the cost is,
Yes.
right? And on the compute side, not the storage side.
Yes.
So that's part of the challenge is people that want to do, machine learning in the healthcare data sets, they really have to understand what they want to do because the costs are very different when they start playing with large files like, radiology data is vastly different than millions of pages of text is a fraction of the cost.
Mm.
So that's why, you need to work together. You need clinical people, IT people, the business people, and then you can construct and get a good estimate of what things will cost to go to your investor. We know that when you tell investors three different numbers, they never give you any money, right? When you keep changing what it's going to cost,
Mm.
that's a sign of not really understanding the project. Do you agree, Andreas? Does that kind of make sense for you guys?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for me. And we're not in the AI space per se. Like we for the most part, we process like structured tabular data, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
we're just doing a very similar project to the one we discussed here with Andrew. And so we know we could do it, and which is why we're doing it for Ergos as well. But the actual processing, I'm just reading the Jensen Huang biography these days, and just reading about some of the mathematics and the physics around the compute. When you get to that kind of scale, it's just immense. And obviously, there's a significant cost and energy factor associated when you get to kind of the AI side of things.
So, so my goodness, what you've solved step one. Another blocking point we have had is getting hospital administrators to agree to share their information.
Hmm.
It's our next stumbling block. We have some leads. They're not the cheapest leads. Do you have experience with this? Do you know, or offline, of course, um, do you have any lawyers that have experience with this? I know you mentioned something interesting, which I do wanna mention here. My clinical work is based in France. My
Hmm.
academic work, I'm a professor in Germany. And I
Hmm.
was, I was, I guess surprised isn't the word, but I was taken aback when you were like, look, we're happy basically to work with, well, you know what, I'm not gonna put you in difficulty too much because I don't want to give you any problems. But what I do want
No,
to say
I
is,
think I know where you're going, Andrew. Basically, given the choice between France and Germany, I think I prefer working with Germany. And it's got to do with, what I was mentioning early on in the conversation. There's healthcare is so contextual. And in France, you've got HDS, which is this kind of a separate certification thing that we need to be audited. We need to spend 25,000 euros probably getting audited to make sure that we are kind of approved by French officials to deal with healthcare data from France.
yeah.
If we go to Germany, we don't have to do that. So, for us, since you have affiliations in both locations, it's far easier for me to point you to let's work from the German side as
Yeah.
the lead site for this project because it's going to make data sharing agreements much easier with all the other sites.
It's so mind-blowing to me. But anyway, thank God I do my academic work in Germany. Do you know of any lawyers that could help us? We don't need it anytime soon. I can
Hmm.
rephrase the question. Can you keep an eye out for lawyers that, once we collect enough patients, will help us kind of negotiate with the hospital administrators to enable us to share data? To
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So so we have looks like just about 3 minutes left, Vincent. So you have been in this space longer than I have. You have seen how hard it is to create businesses. This is, you know, we do a lot of robotics. I'm
Hmm.
involved intimately with a robotic company and
Hmm.
a device company, and it's much easier to get, to see when you're going to make money. But something
Hmm.
like this, where we're trying to create such a massive algorithm, is really not going to make money anytime soon. So yeah, in 2.5 minutes, Vincent, where do you think once we get the data, once we get hospitals to agree to work together. Once we actually get an algorithm, how do you see us making money in a short term, or do we really need to think that this is going to be a long-term problem that we're it's Ergos is not going to be generating money for 5, maybe 10 years, and we just have to accept it? And do we need to therefore work more intimately with governments, with universities? Because this is obviously important to get AI-powered tumor boards going on.
Yeah, I mean, the big challenge is, the FDA move where software is considered to be a type of medical device, right? If you have an algorithm that works in the research setting and you want to bring it into production, into clinical use, you've got to go through, some serious regulatory hurdles that you can't, you know, you can't bake a cake 10 times faster by increasing the temperature 10 times, right? It takes a while. But what I'm excited about is with Andreas and Ledidi and companies like that, for example, Andrew, you may not be able to move data from, say, MD Anderson's radiology suite. They may say, we'll work with you, but you can't upload all our stuff. However, you can put one of your, for example, Ledidi can have an extension into the data center that their data is at. And now you have this hybrid model, right? You have a centralized model and you have these peripheral sites that you can do the compute on-prem, right, Andreas? You don't have to move all that data. You may not be able to. So that's a hybrid, evolution that would let it go faster. And that's some hospitals will say, you'll never get my data, but I'll work with you. And if you work with me, the data stays here. You can get access to it. You can do some compute here, but I'm not just going to give it to you, right? That's part of the challenge. Some places are willing, some are not, but there's ways to skin the cat. But this is not a 6-month revenue. This is a long haul project, which is you come up with a better result.
Yeah. Well, we looks like we have something like 20 seconds left, so we'll have to
Ah,
stop it here. But Andreas, thanks to both you and Dr. Vincent Grasso. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. Okay. Uh, have a
take
great
care.
have a great
Thanks,
day, everybody.
Andreas.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for having me. Enjoy this. Bye bye.
Here, bye bye.